Now, as far as the engine block goes, it's totally stock, factory 302. I didn't do anything to the rotating assembly besides the camshaft. It does have a Comp Cams X. It's a XE264-12 camshaft, roller camshaft. I didn't have to do that. I could have used the factory Explorer camshaft, but they're not really that good. I would have had to turn my boost pressure up higher to get the horsepower that I'm wanting to get to. But I could have done that. It's just not ideal. But like I was saying, the engine is bottom end is totally stock. I didn't really do anything to it at all. I pulled it apart to make sure everything looked okay, and everything did look great. So I'm not sure how many miles this engine has on it. The body has almost 300,000 miles on it, but the engine, when I pulled the heads and I saw the cylinder wall, still had the hatch marks on it. I knew then that the engine didn't have nearly that many miles on it. So I felt safe, and after looking at a few other things, I felt safe keeping everything the way it was. So I did, when I did the heads, these are the factory GT40P heads. I went to alexsparts.com and I searched through their drop-in valve springs, which I honestly, I think with what I've done here is the only way to go. You don't have to do any work to the head at all. They drop right in it. They have a lot of different options you can look through depending on what your camshaft needs. So I picked out what I needed, put them in there just basically like you would factory valve springs, but they're a whole lot better. Drop those valve springs in. Of course, lap the valves. I ported the heads, the exhaust ports on the head. Ported those out a good bit. I put roller rockers in it. Of course, with everything I'm doing here, the camshaft, the turbo, valve springs, the rockers, I figured I need to do something with my push rods. So I bought some, and I bought some chromoly hardened push rods. Measure, I'm not going to give a size for what I used because every engine is different. It doesn't matter if you have the exact same setup. You could have the same cam, the same heads, but things could turn out different, and so you need to measure yourself. But I put some good push rods in it because, of course, I didn't want a broken push rod coming up through my valve cover or causing damage to the head or anything else for that matter. I also used the factory 97 Explorer head gaskets. I read a lot on forums on what Mustang guys are using for head gaskets. And a lot of guys, when they threw up the part number, I looked it up and it's exactly the same part number for the 97 Explorer. So I just used the standard Felpro head gaskets for the 97 Explorer V8, and so far so good. No issues whatsoever. I've had this running around 10 pounds of boost, running it pretty hard, and I haven't had any issues at all. I do have head studs. I would suggest that. Buy some head studs, ARP. Some people, have OK ratings for, the cheaper head studs. But, that's something you don't want to fail. It could cause some major damage, or at the very least be a huge inconvenience and cost you some money with a tow bill. So I did use some head studs, and like I said, the factory, or the Felpro head gaskets for the 97 Explorer, and everything works great. So I know it's hard to see back there, but you can see here is a fuel pressure gauge that is connected to a fuel pressure regulator. and that's a 1-to-1 regulator, which means I have a line here coming from this is vacuum and boost pressure. So basically, when I'm into boost, that boost signal comes through this line to the fuel pressure regulator, and for every 1 pound of boost I make, it ups the fuel pressure by 1 pound. So I'm getting a increased fuel pressure and keeping everything in check the way it needs to be as far as the fuel goes. All right, now let's get into what I've done for the turbo setup. And I'm not going to go through every little thing here. There's just so much as far as wiring and the way I ran lines and all of that kind of thing. You could, if you wanted to do it yourself, you might want to do things a little different as far as that goes. So I'm just going to cover the major things: piping, what I had to do to get everything to fit, basically. So yeah, let's start on that. Okay, so first things first, I had to figure out what I was going to do for headers so I could get everything to work out. What I ended up doing, and if we can see it here, I don't know if you'll be able to see them. Anyhow, down in there, and of course on both sides, are Mustang twin turbo headers. I believe they are used on a Fox body. They might be used on other Mustangs as well, but they are Mustang 5.0 twin turbo headers, and they normally end right here at this flange, and they're made for a T3 turbo that would bolt on here, so you'd have 2 turbos, one bolted here and one bolted here normally. So I wanted to do a single turbo setup, so I looked around and I found on eBay some cast stainless 90-degree elbows that are T3 to V-band. Now normally how this is set up, what these are used for, the V-band side goes to your header, and then this flange here is what your turbo bolts to. But I figured, I could flip it around, bolt that to the header flange, then I have a V-band here to connect all my hot piping to on both sides, do my crossover. As you can see on top, I welded my wastegates, one here and one here. I wanted to make sure that I could evacuate exhaust efficiently, and so far this is working pretty good. Now that I've got things dialed in pretty good, it's working fairly well. All right, let's go over this the last part of this header fitment, which is the steering shaft, and of course the biggest ordeal to overcome is because of the steering shaft, and that's because from the factory, I don't know if you can see down there, see that's a double U joint I put in, but from the factory this shaft, it's actually a little more this way, and it's a straight shot down to the rack and pinion. And of course, with these headers, you can see this is the header here. With that coming straight down to the rack and pinion, it hit that header. You couldn't even get it in there, actually. Just no way it would have worked. So what I ended up doing was using a double U joint, which is here. With this end of the U joint is for a double D shaft, which is what is coming out of the firewall. So comes down the double U joint, 3/4 inch double U joint, to female end on this side for a double D, 3/4 inch double D shaft. And you can't really see it, but I also have a length of 3/4 inch double D shaft here, going down into the female part of the factory shaft. And if you ever take this apart, you'll see what I mean. There's like a slip shaft there. So basically, I just had to take this upper part of the factory shaft out of that lower section, which is a female section, and this 3/4 inch shaft that I purchased fit into that section. So basically, you know, everything basically, there's a little more to it, and I can go into more depth if you want that. But that's pretty much what I had to do to get these to fit, is move this steering shaft over, and just so everything would fit around there.